The station smelled of old paper and recycled coolant. I was always awake at that hour. 44 years of nitrotation listening work will do that to a mind. You stop sleeping in long stretches and start listening instead, even when there is nothing there. Old instinct. The kind that had kept me employed past the age when most of my colleagues went home to write their memoirs. At 3:12 the signal arrived. It came in on every active frequency simultaneously, including 3 that had never been published, 3 that existed only inside our internal communication architecture, 3 that no external species should have known existed. The youngest analyst in the room, a Varith named Torev, barely out of his first decade of service, said very quietly, "How?" It was not a question with an obvious answer. I rubbed the flat of my thumb across the back of my left hand. The gesture was automatic by then, 44 years automatic. My colleagues had learned to read it as "do not interrupt him right now." They did not interrupt me. The signal had no encryption, no handshake protocol, no preamble. It simply was the way a stone is or a temperature is. 7 words in every language the Council had ever cataloged, plus 17 that had been extinct for centuries. I watched the translation queue populate on my terminal for 312 languages, each one carrying the exact same message. "We are here, we are not alone, please be careful. We mean you no harm." I tilted my screen another degree off true. The corridor lights had been flickering all week. The station's external sensors had fixed the transmission origin within 12 seconds. A single surface point on the third planet of an unremarkable yellow star. A city, a building, no visible antenna structure of any kind that our instruments could resolve. "Humanity," Torev said, reading from the species identification field. His secondary eyelids had closed laterally, the Varith stress response. He looked almost contemptuous, though I knew him well enough to know he was afraid. They're not supposed to have this capability for another 40 years. "The assessment appears to have been optimistic," I said. "Iran, you know when they updated the timeline last? 3 months ago, 3 months. And now," he gestured at the display where the 7 words were still cycling through language after language after language. "This isn't just ahead of projection, this is..." "Someone has been inside our walls," I said, "for longer than we have." The room went quiet. The transmission repeated 7 times over the next 11 hours. Same words, same frequencies, same impossible precision, no variation, no elaboration, no request for response. I sat at my terminal through all of it. The 11-degree screen tilt caught the corridor light at an angle that didn't hurt my eyes. I had done this at every posting for 30 years. The gesture had become something close to ritual. At 1422, a junior analyst named Parrish, one of the few humans in Council service, which meant she was either very good or very lucky, and in her case it was both, brought me a thermal print of the signal's frequency distribution pattern. "Look at the gaps," she said. I looked. The gaps were not gaps, they were signatures. 3 specific frequencies had been excluded from the broadcast pattern, 3 frequencies that did not belong to any published Council communications band. 3 frequencies that existed only in the internal architecture of our deepest signal intelligence network. "Someone has been inside our walls," Parrish said, echoing my own words from 11 hours earlier. She did not know I had said them. The coincidence made my thumb press harder against my hand. "Send a tier access request," I said, "for the Dorith sealed files." "The Dorith, they've been closed for 600 years. Send it." The denial arrived in under 3 seconds. Automated, not reviewed, not considered. The system had not even checked to see if I had sufficient clearance. It had simply bounced the request back with a default rejection template that hadn't been updated in 40 years. I noted the texture of the denial, the way it landed like a door closing, the way it assumed the question was finished. I put the card request in my pocket metaphorically. I would come back to it. The archive gap had been there for 14 years. I had found it by accident during a routine audit migration, a seam between 2 database generations that had never been properly bridged. Older systems, older protocols, older assumptions about what information was important enough to preserve. The gap was small. A few thousand files that had fallen between the cracks during a transfer that someone had signed off as complete without checking the checksums. I had never used it before. I used it now. The files were raw, no formatting, no metadata. Some of them were corrupted at the edges, but the Dorith sealed records were there, scattered across the gap like debris from an old shipwreck. I pulled them one by one, reading in the dark of my quarters with the terminal light low and the corridor outside silent. The Dorith Scout mission, 312 Council standard years ago. For crew. Visual confirmation of an undocumented entity in the target system. the same system the human transmission had originated from, though the coordinates did not match exactly. The entity had not been hostile. It had not been anything the crew could classify. All four requested immediate withdrawal. Psychological disturbance, lasting 6-19 cycles post-mission. Recommend restricted access, no further contact. I read the file twice. The language was careful, clinical. The kind of careful clinical that usually meant the people writing it were trying very hard not to say what they actually thought. The follow expedition, 308 Council standard years ago. Partially redacted, large sections blacked out by an encryption key that had been retired before I was born, but 11 words remained intact. Crew encountered same phenomenon. Vessel returned, no further missions approved. That was all. I sat back in my chair, my thumb pressed against my hand. I counted the syllables of the 11 words on the underside of my fingers, a residual habit from acoustic phonetics training, something I did when I was afraid but needed to appear calm. Crew encountered, same phenomenon, 7 syllables, vessel returned, 4 no further missions approved, 7 a pattern, meaningless but the counting helped. The crew's psychological evaluations were not in the archive gap. They were in the main database, properly indexed, properly restricted, accessible only to senior medical personnel and the director of fleet operations. I accessed them anyway. It took 11 hours. A request routed through 3 different departmental aliases. A signature from a fleet medical corps officer who had been dead for 40 years. A flag that the system should have caught but didn't, because the system was old and tired and had been patched too many times by people who assumed no one would ever look this closely. 6 crew members, 5 heavily sedated during their interviews. 3 resigned from council service entirely within the year following their return. Persistent sense of being observed. Recurring dreams of something large in the dark, not threatening, not warm, simply present in a way that made sleep impossible. And then, at the bottom of the 5th crew member's file, a note that made me stop rubbing my hand and simply hold it instead. Crew members 4 and 6 reported beginning to leave food outside their quarters at night by instinct in the manner of an offering. Neither could explain the behavior. Neither wished to stop. I read the note 7 times. The phrase appeared in all 6 files. Something very old that had not finished thinking yet. Identical, word for word, across 6 separate interviews conducted over 3 weeks by 3 different psychologists. The crew had not coordinated their testimony. They had been held in different facilities under different observation protocols with no contact between them. But they had all said the same thing. I typed the phrase into the council's linguistic archive. The search returned no matches. I typed it again with alternative syntax variations. Nothing. I typed it in the Dorith language, which I had studied for 11 years and still did not speak fluently. The archive returned a single result. A fragment from a Dorith religious text dated approximately 800 years before their civilization had closed itself off from external contact. The watcher does not finish, the watcher simply watches, and what it watches it remembers. I wrote my analysis at 300, sitting at my terminal with the 11-degree tilt and the faint smell of old paper, and the knowledge that I had just spent 36 hours accessing files I was not authorized to see. Humanity shares its world with something ancient. Something that operates on a scale that makes our best instruments look approximate. Something that noticed our ships 400 years ago and sent them home, not with violence but with a firm, quiet, absolute redirect. The Dorith knew about it. They chose to close themselves off rather than engage with it further. Humanity made a different choice. They have been living next to this thing for their entire existence. They have not weaponized it. They have not used it to threaten anyone. They have simply lived. And when they finally achieved the capability to send a signal beyond their system, they did not send a demand. They did not send a threat. They did not send a demonstration of power. They sent 7 words in every language they could find, including languages that have been dead for centuries, on frequencies they should not have known existed. And underneath all of it, if you knew how to listen, please don't get hurt. At 4:23, a priority alert. Unscheduled vessel arrival, Dock Arm 9, no approach request, no travel through normal space, no registration, no flight plan, no identification transponder. 1 passenger. Species human, female, no title listed, no organization listed. In the field marked purpose of visit, 3 words. I was invited. I walked to the dock because when nobody moves, I have always been the person who moves. The corridor to Arm 9 was cold. The peripheral docks always were reinforced steel ribs, pressure seals, the faint whistle of atmospheric systems struggling to keep the temperature stable. 1 observation panel, scratched from decades of hurried collisions with supply manifests, showed the stars outside. They were drifting rather than turning. The station's rotational gravity did that 0.4 standard, enough to keep things from floating, not enough to feel entirely natural. The dock arm showed an engaged clamp and a confirmed seal. On the other side of the airlock, open space and stars. No vessel. The airlock cycled, the inner door opened. A figure stepped through, carrying a small cloth bag. She was shorter than I had expected. Shorter than most Varath adults, certainly, though that was not unusual. Humans ran small compared to my species. Soft tissue exterior, bilateral symmetry, binocular vision. Her hair was pulled back from her face in a way that suggested she had been traveling for a while and had stopped caring about how she looked. Her boots had a smear of dark soil on the left toe. She had not cleaned it. "You must be Tail," she said in council standard without any accent. Her voice was lower than I had expected. Calm, the kind of calm that came from having finished being surprised by things a long time ago. "I read your analysis of Doroth phonemic drift. It was very good." I waited. "I am Myra Solon." She slung the cloth bag over her shoulder. "I believe we have some things to discuss." Security arrived 4 minutes later. I had 4 minutes. We walked the length of dock arm 9 together, Solon matching my pace without comment. The corridor's pressure seals hissed as we passed them. The observation panel showed the same drifting stars. 3 other civilizations have sent probe formations into our system in the past 2 years, she said. Not the Council. The probes did not survive. Their senders believe they malfunctioned. Did they? We would prefer that understanding to persist, she said, because the alternative is a panic. What stopped them? She looked at me the way a person looks when they are deciding how much of a heavy thing to set down in front of someone they have only just met. Something that has lived there longer than we have, she said. Something that was old when your earliest recorded civilization was young. It does not have a name that translates. It exists, it is aware, and it is very large in ways that have nothing to do with physical size. "The Watcher," I said. Her step did not falter. "You found the Doroth files." 6 crew members, all of them said the same thing. Because it is true. We reached the end of the dock arm. The door to the main corridor was sealed, waiting for security to arrive and open it. Solon stopped and turned to face me. "Your ships came 400 years ago, the Doroth before that, others before them. The Watcher has been here for longer than anyone has been recording time. It does not threaten, it does not attack. It simply observes, and occasionally when it thinks something might be in danger, it redirects." "Redirects how?" She smiled. It was a small smile, not quite sad, not quite amused. "Wait and see." The outer deliberation chamber was not designed for comfort. 40 seats around a curved table. Light from overhead panels designed to make everyone feel observed. Ceremonial tea that was objectively bad, inherited from a station renovation 200 years ago that nobody had had the authority to reverse. 12 council members sat in their assigned places. Fleet Marshal Orvan Dresch had been added to the attendee list that morning. He sat at the north face of the table, where whoever stood closest was assumed to be responsible. His chitinous shoulder plating broadened his silhouette by a third. His secondary eyelids were closed laterally, calm to his staff, contempt to everyone else. Myra Solon sat in the witness seat. She accepted the ceremonial tea. She took a sip. "This is genuinely nice," she said. The aide who had offered it blinked. No delegation had ever said that. It was known internally to be extremely bad. Solon took another sip. "I mean it. The floral notes are unusual. What is the base?" The aide stammered something about a moss derivative from the 4th moon of a gas giant I had never heard of. Solon nodded like she was genuinely interested. I sat in the observer gallery, where no one noticed me. The briefing took 3 hours. Solon answered every question plainly. She did not deflect. She did not perform outrage when someone implied she was lying. She did not deploy the defensive posturing most delegations carried into this room like armor. She simply talked. The system's coordinates, the Watcher's approximate nature, as much as any of it could be approximated. The history of external contact attempts, including the Doroth missions and the Council's own scout expeditions. The human decision to send a warning rather than a demand. "Let me understand the position," Fleet Marshal Dresch said finally. His command stylus was in his hand. He had not used it to write anything. He never did. He tapped it against the table instead. A slow, deliberate rhythm. "You are asking us to voluntarily withdraw all monitoring operations and take your word that this entity is not a threat." "I am asking you to respect the warning we issued," Solon said. "The status of the system does not change based on whether the Council formally acknowledges it. The situation is what it is regardless." Dresch's jaw tightened slightly. I had seen that expression before in operational briefings, in after-action reports, in the moments before a fleet marshal made a decision that would cost lives. If the council decided to send a fleet, Zolan set her teacup down. Then the fleet would be redirected, she said, and when it came back, your crews would need time to recover. No one would be harmed. But there would be a great many confusing reports and a significant expenditure of embarrassment. She said it the way a person reads a weather forecast. No pleasure, no threat, information provided so that a decision could be informed. Dresh's secondary eyelids opened, closed, opened again. The rhythm of his stylus changed. At 300, the fleet launched. 47 vessels. I learned by walking past an open operations room door at the wrong time and seeing enough before someone closed it. I went to Solan's quarters immediately. They had given her a small room near the observation deck close to the outer hull, minimal furniture, one window that showed the stars. She was already awake, she already knew. About 30 minutes ago, she said before I told her. The room was dark except for the starlight. She was sitting cross-legged on the floor near the window, her back against the wall, her cloth bag beside her. Can you stop it? I asked. I am quite ordinary, she said it without self-pity, a simple statement of fact. I studied languages and diplomatic history, and I can make a reasonable soup from basic ingredients. That is approximately the full list of my remarkable qualities. She meant it. I sat in the room's only chair. It was too small for my frame, human furniture probably, brought up from the surface of some council world that had been colonized by people who forgot to adjust the proportions. Solan leaned against the wall. What will the correction look like? I asked. She considered the question. The ships will be redirected. The crews will be fine, a vague sense of having stood in a very large presence. Like the crew reports. Yes, she tilted her head looking at the stars. Like standing in a cathedral, some people say, though I think that undersells it considerably. They will not want to try again. No, she said it softly. Not because they are afraid, or not only because they are afraid, because they will have been near it. She paused, her hand moved to her chest, a gesture I would later learn meant nothing and everything, a human thing, a Solan thing, the way she touched the space over her heart when she was trying to explain something that did not have words. It is like trying to push an ocean with your hands. After you have tried once, you understand that the ocean does not notice. The station's alert system chimed. 4:47, the fleet had crossed the boundary. Clean sensor readings, no resistance detected. Dresh's voice came over the internal channel, brief and certain, proceeding as planned. Solan closed her eyes. I counted the syllables of the fleet's name on my fingers, combined Fleet Directorate Expeditionary Wing, and waited. The chime came again at 5:03. All 47 vessels had returned to pre-launch orbital coordinates. Engines cold, all crew reporting nominal health, no damage. Transit time through the target system, according to every internal ship clock, 0. According to the station's external sensors, 11 minutes. The ships had been gone for 11 minutes and no one aboard them had experienced any of it. And every command system on every vessel carried a new file. I was in the emergency briefing when the council members read it. The file had no origin stamp, no sender identification. It had appeared the way light appears when you open a curtain, simply present where it had not been, on 47 command systems simultaneously, across 47 ships that had just returned from a journey none of their crews remembered taking. Fleet Marshal Dresh's complete operational plan, every tactical decision, every ship formation, every contingency scenario he had prepared, every assumption he had built into the architecture of the mission. And in the margins of every section, quiet and precise, corrections. Not insults, not mockery. I had seen enough military after-action reports to recognize the difference between contempt and pedagogy. These annotations were the work of a reader who had reviewed the material carefully and wanted it to be better. Logical errors identified not with triumph, but with the patience of someone explaining something to a student who had misunderstood a fundamental concept. Assumptions that did not hold, explained gently. Places where the plan had fundamentally misjudged the nature of what it was planning against, noted without condescension. Your formation assumes the target cannot reposition faster than your sensor refresh rate. This assumption is incorrect. Your contingency for communication failure does not account for the possibility that the other party may hear you perfectly and choose to respond in a way your protocols do not recognize. Consider revising. You have classified the entity as potentially hostile. This classification is based on zero evidence. We understand that your protocols require a default assumption in ambiguous situations. We would like to gently suggest that your default assumption may be preventing you from seeing the situation clearly. The last line of the annotations read, "We hope this is useful. We are happy to discuss further. Please feel free to send a representative. Below that, a small symbol. The cultural database cross-referenced it 3 times before returning a confident identification. It was a smiley face. The room was very quiet. I watched Dresh's face as the fleet marshal read the annotations on his own plan. The careful, patient dissection of every choice he had made. The gentle, comprehensive record of every place he had been wrong. His secondary eyelids had opened fully, no calculation now, no performance of calm. He looked like a man who had finally understood, completely and without any remaining exit, that the argument he had been building toward was never going to work. Not because he had been stopped. Because he had never been in the right conversation. His command stylus was on the table. He was not tapping it. He was not holding it. It lay there like a forgotten tool, and Dresh stared at the display in front of him, and no one in the room spoke. Council member Valhran, old by his species measure, deliberate, the kind of person who had accumulated so much experience they no longer needed to rush through anything, cleared his throat. The smiley face, he said, "What does it mean?" No one answered. I left the briefing. The corridor outside was empty. The station's night cycle had ended 2 hours ago, but the lights were still dim. Someone had forgotten to adjust the schedule after the emergency. I walked past the hexagonal display table in the signal room, where analysts were still staring at the transmission logs as if the logs might change if they looked long enough. Solan's quarters were at the end of the observation wing. The door was unlocked. She was sitting cross-legged near the window again. Her eyes were closed. Her hands rested on her knees, palms up, the way I had seen human meditation hollows depict. The cloth bag was still beside her. She heard the door and opened her eyes. The smiley face, I said. She smiled. It was the most human thing I had seen since she arrived. Genuine, unguarded, touched with something that might have been relief or might have been exhaustion or might have been both. That was not our idea, she said. That was entirely its own initiative. We were as surprised as you. I sat on the floor across from her. The observation window showed the stars, drifting in their slow 0.4 gravity rotation. The station's coolant systems hummed somewhere in the walls. It could have stopped the fleet, I said, before they crossed the boundary, before they even launched. Yes. It could have destroyed them. Yes. But it didn't. It sent them back with a corrected war plan and a smiley face. Solan nodded. The Watcher has never destroyed anything, not in any record we have, and our records go back further than the Council's. She picked up her teacup. The ceremonial tea had cooled hours ago, but she drank it anyway. It redirects, it corrects, it waits. That is what it does. The Dorith closed themselves off because of it. The Dorith were afraid, she said it without judgment, not of the Watcher, of what it meant, of the scale of it, of the way it made them feel small. She set the cup down. We have been afraid too, for most of our history, actually, but we kept living next to it. We kept paying attention. And eventually we realized that being small next to something very large is not the same as being unimportant. The formal council deliberations began at 900. They continued for 11 days. Closed sessions, raised voices in corridors not designed for them, aides running between offices with data slates and tired eyes. The ceremonial tea ran out on day 3. Someone found a replacement blend that was even worse, and the council drank it without complaint because no one had the energy to care anymore. Solan was detained on day 4. Protective custody, the official language said. House arrest, the understood meaning. The council claimed it was for her safety. The fleet directorate had supporters, and some of them had made statements that legal affairs had flagged as concerning. I did not believe the explanation. Neither did Solan. But she did not protest. She simply moved from her small room near the observation deck to a smaller room deeper inside the station, and she waited. I visited every day. I brought station food. She ate it with polite tolerance, the same expression she had worn while complimenting the ceremonial tea, which I now understood was not politeness but a genuine appreciation for things that other people had decided were bad. She asked about the analysis I was writing. The Dorith phonemic drift paper, I said. No, she set down her fork. The analysis of what just happened, the one you are writing for the record, the one that will outlast everyone in that chamber. I had not told her I was writing it. I had not told anyone. How did you know? She tapped her temple. Human thing, pattern recognition. You have the look of someone who is taking notes even when they are not holding a stylus. I brought her drafts on day 5. She read them in silence, her lips moving slightly, sub-vocalizing, I realized, the way humans sometimes did when they were processing written language. Her forehead creased in concentration. Here, she said, pointing to a paragraph about the Watcher's probable motivations. You are assuming it thinks like we do. It does not. Then how should I describe it? She considered the question for a long time. The station's lights flickered, maintenance cycle probably, though I had started to wonder. You know how when you stand at the observation window and look at the stars, you are not threatening them, you are just looking. The stars are not afraid of you. They do not even notice you. But if one of the stars suddenly started moving toward you, you would pay attention. You would not be angry. You would just redirect it gently because you do not want it to crash into the station. The Watcher redirected the fleet the way I would redirect a drifting cargo container. Yes, she smiled. Now you are understanding. On day 7, I asked her if the Watcher was aware of the vote proceedings. Yes. Does it care about the outcome? She considered carefully. It cares the way someone cares when they watch a person they are fond of make a difficult decision. It is not relying on the council for anything, but it is paying attention. I asked if she was afraid of it. She set down the draft, her hand moved to her chest again, the gesture I had seen before, the one that meant nothing and everything. No, I respect it enormously. And sometimes, when I try to think too hard about what it actually is, I feel something like standing at the edge of something very deep and looking down. But not afraid, we grew up near it, it is part of our context. The council does not have that context. No, her voice softened. That is why I am here. To give them enough context to make a choice that is not entirely blind. And if they make the wrong choice. She looked at me the way she had looked at me on Dock Arm 9 when she was deciding how much of a heavy thing to set down. Then the Watcher will continue to exist. The situation will continue to be what it is. The only difference will be that the council will have chosen to remain ignorant of it, and that ignorance will cost them eventually. She paused. What will you do? If the vote goes wrong. Yes. I thought about it. 44 years of nitrotation listening work. 44 years of being the person they called when something spoke from the dark. 44 years of reading the footnotes that everyone else skipped. I will keep writing, I said. And I will keep asking questions, and eventually someone will listen. She nodded. It seemed to be the right answer. The vote came on day 11. Minister Valhrin came out of the chamber at the end of the 4th hour. He walked slowly, older than most of the other council members, older than anyone in the room, older than the station itself maybe. He sat across from me in the outer office where I had been waiting. His hands rested on the table. They were trembling slightly. The council has voted, he said. I waited. Sovereign Sanctuary designation, first of its kind in council records. He listed the provisions as if reading from a document he had already memorized. No approach without formal invitation. Full withdrawal of monitoring assets. Diplomatic recognition of human sovereignty over the system in question. Protected status under council law. Restricted access to all files related to the entity. Fleet Marshal Dresch voted in favor, Valhrin said, by a narrow margin. I had not expected that. Why? Your analysis? Valhrin looked at me. His eyes were tired. He read it, the one you wrote at 300 before the representative arrived. Someone put it on his terminal. I had not put it there. I suspect, Valhrin said slowly, that the same someone who put the annotated war plan on his command system also put your analysis on his terminal. But that is speculation. What is not speculation is that he read it, and after the fleet returned, he read it again. And then he came to my office and said, very quietly, the xenolinguist was right. Valhrin leaned back. Your analysis was persuasive. It was accurate. Yes, he almost smiled. That is what was persuasive. I found Solon in her quarters, the original ones near the observation deck. Someone had released her from protective custody an hour after the vote. She was packing her cloth bag. The ceremonial tea had been replaced. A fresh pot sat on the small table, steaming. You are leaving, I said. The invitation has been extended. The council has accepted it. My work here is done. She folded a small piece of cloth, a shirt, I realized, though the proportions were wrong for her frame. A gift for someone, maybe. You will receive formal notification from the diplomatic corps within the week. They will want to establish a permanent liaison. The Watcher has indicated that it is willing to receive visitors on its own terms. Indicated how? She smiled. You will find out. I walked her to Dock Arm 9. The corridor was cold. The pressure seals hissed. The observation panel showed the stars drifting. Nothing waited on the other side of the airlock, just open space and the distant glow of the station's navigation beacons. At the door, Solon stopped. She reached into her jacket pocket and produced a small card. Pressed Terran paper stock, heavier than council standard material. Handwritten in blue-black ink that did not exist in any Varith pigment catalog. Coordinates on one side. The edge of the mapped regions past the outer survey charts in the unmapped space where the records went thin. On the other side, one line. If you ever want to visit properly, knock first. She pressed the card into my hand. Her fingers were warm. The card was warm, carried against her body for the entire journey, maybe, or something else entirely. You heard the warning correctly, she said. Before anyone else did, you heard "please don't get hurt" underneath the words. That is rare, the watcher noticed. I am not sure I want to be noticed. She laughed. It was a small laugh, quiet, not unkind. Too late for that. She went through the airlock, the door sealed, 3 minutes of open space and stars. Then without transition, she was gone. I have the card still. 7 years. I press my thumb against my jacket over the left breast pocket and the card pushes back, still there, still slightly warm, still thick. The edges have softened with handling, but the writing has not smeared. The ink remains blue-black in a shade that does not exist in any Vareth catalog. The coordinates are at the edge of the mapped regions. I would need the outer charts. I have not requested them yet. I think about Solon often, the way she walked through an empty airlock, the way she complimented the ceremonial tea, the way she sat cross-legged on the floor near the observation window, counting stars or praying or simply being in a way that the rest of us had forgotten how to do. The council established the permanent liaison. A small office in a small building on a small council world, staffed by people who had read my analysis and believed it. I am not the liaison. I am still at listening station Orath 7, still on night rotation, still awake at 300 when the dark is quiet and the signals are mostly static. Sometimes I imagine what it would be like to use the card, to request the outer charts, to travel to the edge of the mapped regions and knock. The universe is old and mostly dark, and what lives in it is largely doing its best. Somewhere at the edge of it, on a world that looks ordinary from a distance, a species lived next to something incomprehensible and stayed kind. That is not a small thing. That is the whole thing. 7 years of thinking and I keep arriving at the same conclusion. I am going to go. When I am ready, I am becoming ready. I have the card in my pocket. Someday soon I am going to knock.